more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles. Welcome, everyone, to A Sense of Beer Style. Jeremy and Julia here as your co-hosts, guides, and fellow beer explorers. And today, Jeremy, you're smiling wide, and I love it. We are in specialty IPA land, and we are now going to cover Brown IPA, or India Pale Ale. The reason I'm excited about this show, is because it's a harder to find style, so this kind of show could be very useful to people to calibrate. And also, too, when you read the style guidelines, and we religiously cover the Beer Judge Certification Program 2021 guidelines, show by show for each style. This, for the specialty IPA group, which specialty IPA is pretty much take a color and you can put it in the style guidelines, white, black, brown, red, etc. You get this one, Brown IPA, is a very sessionable version of all of the specialty IPAs. So to me, this one is the most palatable in terms of sessionability, and just to kind of set it up, and Jeremy will talk ingredients in a moment. It is a hoppy beer because it's an India Pale Ale specialty version, so known to be bitter. It's got essence of malt for sure, but then it's got these lighter, medium, higher temperature kiln malt flavors, not high roasted malt and not low kilned flavors of, the dark caramel and the chocolate and the toffee and fruit character, right? Dark fruit character that's really inviting. So it is a marriage. Jeremy talks all the time about love children and beer. So I'll take a cue from my co-host here, but you take an American brown ale, you take an American IPA, they have a love child, and then there you have it. There is Brown IPA. And the history is a little muddled to me. The style guidelines don't even really do a great job documenting it. The style guidelines point you to American brown ale to read about that. So it was inspired by American brown ale, but there's a couple of brewers that could probably raise their hands, Smutty Nose being one, Dogfish Head on the mix, who say that they got this style kind of on people's radar. But with that, Jeremy, it's very helpful to overview ingredients before we do sensory, to talk to people about what leads to the flavor profile of this beer.
Yeah, and one quick note too, I am aware that some people have referred to this in the past as a Texas Brown. I don't know the story behind that. I don't know the relation to that, but it's just kind of a fun little moniker that, you hear people come up with different names for a beer from time to time. And so if you hear a Texas Brown, they're likely referring to the Brown IPA. When it comes to the beer ingredients, think about, for those of you who brew, those of you who home brew, think about how you would construct a simple IPA. We're going to have some 2-row pale malt. Maybe we throw some crystal in there just for a little bit of sweetness. Maybe we don't. But it's all going to be about the hops. And if it's an American IPA, we're looking at the American or New World hops. So whereas if we're thinking about British hops, we're thinking earth. If we're thinking German hops, we're thinking garden. When we think of American hops, we're thinking the forest. And New World hops is really thinking about tropical fruit. And so that's just a simple, oversimple way of thinking about it. But so we're thinking forest and we're thinking tropical fruit with the American New World hop ingredients here. But to make this brown, that's where we are going to see more of those crystal malts. We are going to see a very light hand of some of these roasted chocolate malts, because we want the color and we want just a dash of that flavor, but we do not want it to go too far overboard. So it's very judicious use of some of these really dark malts. And as far as yeast goes, the BJCP guidelines don't specify, but I'm going to plant my flag in, because this is an Americanized iteration of a British beer, that any American yeast or British yeast would be up for grabs here.
Ale yeast.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Ale yeast. This is an ale, and I take that for granted. But so that's ingredients. Let's talk about what this beer would look like.
Right. If you're lucky enough to have one in your hand, then I will be talking you along with what you're seeing. If not, love to fantasize about it and go brew one. But reddish brown to dark brown. So just think brown and not black. It doesn't go to black. There's a reason it's a brown IPA instead of a black IPA. Clear, almost opaque is allowable for sure, but not too hazy. Light haze is optional and allowable, but the word light is an emphasis. This should not be an overly hop hazed beer for sure. Medium size, cream colored, tan collar of foam, and good retention for that collar of foam is what you would expect, and that's kind of sounds like it would be a very beautiful beer, and if not very enticing to look at. What would it smell like in your glass, Jeremy?
It would smell like heaven. Let's just call it that. It would just smell like heaven. Uh, so these, when I have had a few of these, they're harder to find these days, but they are just such an interesting thing to spend some quality time with. Back in the day, we'd get a brand new record, we'd take it home, put on our earphones, and we would open up that cover and read the lyrics as we listen to the songs. I recommend everyone does something like that if you find this beer, because it's harder to find. It has unique and has some wonderful stories to tell. I always start with malt when I talk about aroma and flavor. So with this, it is a malt balanced IPA, if that makes any sense. It is a hop forward beer generically because it's an IPA, but there's enough malt in this that it's standing just right behind that the hop presence. So we're talking about a medium low to medium malt, but we're talking flavors of chocolate from moderately sweet to moderately dark. So it could be nuts, could be slightly toasty cashews. I love that flavor when I get it in a beer. It could be medium to dark caramel, toffee, toasted bread crust, and you can have some esters come through in there too from the ale yeast and the malt that really kind of gives you this dark fruit impression. It could be raisins, it could be plums, it could be prunes, it could be any of these wonderful things that just add another little layer of flavor. It's super interesting. When we start talking about hops, because it is a hop forward beer, remember the malt was medium low to medium, and the hops are typically medium to medium high. You see how they layer there. You've had this just beautiful foundational backbone of malt on top of which the hops just lay down and just rest. And it's wonderful. Again, we're talking about New World or American hops, tropical, stone fruit, forest type of flavors, resin. But this can also manifest in having just a little touch of an alcohol aroma. And for me, it could be just a slight little spicy, almost pepperminty kind of pepper kind of note that's there 1 second and gone the next. And that is just a wonderful thing to experience as well. But that's the aroma. Let's talk flavor.
Everything that Jeremy just said, and this often happens in aroma, really does carry over pretty much to the flavor if you're able to perceive it in the sense of what flavor is. But you've got more because you've got bitterness and a few other nuances. But this beer, just like all India Pale Ales, should lead with hop flavor and aroma, and it does. Medium to high hop flavor is what you would want to expect. Medium to low supportive malty flavor with the same descriptors kind of as aroma. And so you've got that chocolate or that light low toffee essence from the malt. The malt and the hops are going to be in concert. Certainly, that's the point. I love the idea of the fact that there is medium high to high bitterness. So it reminds you it's an India Pale Ale. So pay attention to that bitterness because it's a huge aspect of this beer style. And then the finish, right? Dry to medium finish. So you are going to look for certain examples that leave you very quenched and ready for that next bite. And then other examples are going to have enough residual sugar. So it's a medium level, but they're never cloyingly sweet or even considered sweet. And then that high bitterness is going to balance no matter what the residual sugar that's there. Low esters in the flavor, sometimes really hard to get with American ale yeast, a little easier with English ale yeast to get the esters in the flavor. Aroma is a different story, but low esters are optional according to the style guidelines. And then just low to medium ethanol is going to be noticed for sure. And you just don't want things roasted or burnt. That's not the point of this, particularly in the brown IPA as opposed to black IPA. So the malt is not going to be aggressive in any of that fashion.
Yeah. When we start talking about mouthfeel, I mean, remember, to get this thing to be brown, to have these flavors and aromas that we just talked about, we are going to use some malts that don't have or have are going to end up with some larger chain sugars like dextrins. And it depends on what temperature we mash it in and all that stuff. And you can go listen to our prep episode on how things are brewed. But that's going to, depending on how well it attenuates, how much of that is left over, we can have a medium low to a medium body. The point of this is to support the hops, but we have an incredible support system for this beer. So that includes the mouthfeel of a medium low to medium body. The texture should be super smooth. The carbonation can be medium to moderately high, but we don't want any harsh astringency to come through this. You can get a little bit. We're putting hops, we're putting some dark grains in there maybe, and that will lend a little bit of that drying effect, that astringency on your palate. And just a little bit is okay, but shouldn't be a lot. And then we talked about the alcohol. We can smell the alcohol, we can taste the alcohol, and we can feel the alcohol, and that just gives you that nice little warming sensation inside your mouth and your palate. And that's how this ought to come across when it's done really well. So that's mouthfeel. Let's talk a little bit more about the style comparison. What can we compare this to?
And I love the style comparison because in the specialty IPA section of the BJCP guidelines, you're going to see it compared to kind of its brother and sister styles.
Mm-hmm.
It's compared to a black IPA, but it's not as much roasted flavor. It's compared to a red IPA, but more chocolate flavor, right? And so you are able to compare it to, in the style guidelines, what it's very closely slipped in with and next to. It's also a stronger, more bitter version than an American brown ale. American brown ale is what Jeremy kind of alluded to in the beginning of that Texas brown. American homebrewers and a homebrew store, inspired by a trip to California, lo and behold, took English brown and turned it basically into American brown ale. What does that mean? It means more hops. It probably means American ale yeast, not English ale yeast. So a little bit less esters. And then you go up one, think, Spinal Tap and 11, turn American brown ale up to 11, and then you get brown
Anything
IPA.
You can do, I can do better.
Right. And so that's brown IPA, but it's not so aggressive that it doesn't pay attention to the need for nuance. That's a really important phrase. This style is nuanced, as is all proper examples of specialty IPAs. So that's a fun kind of example for the style comparison. And then commercial examples Jeremy is going to share with you, so you can taste on your own and start to test yourself against some of the styles that I just compared brown IPA to.
Yeah, there's a few I haven't tasted. The Russian River Janet's Brown Ale, I haven't had that one yet, but I hear from good authority it's fantastic. The Harpoon Brown IPA, one that I have had, Dogfish Head, the Indian Brown Ale, is a fantastic beer. Those are the ones that are still listed under the commercial examples. They are hard to find, so you may have to talk your local brewer into brewing one, or better yet, brew it at home. But that's if you can find one, grab it and taste it and see, and read these as you compare, or better yet, listen to us talk about it as you taste it and see how it compares. But yeah, that's commercial. Let's talk about the vital stats.
So vital statistics are going to use a baseline of kind of American IPA, somewhat different, but close to where you land. And we'll start with alcohol by volume. Pretty sessionable level, 5.5 to 7.5% alcohol. Remember, most wines these days, oh my gosh, the ones from California, 13, 14% ABV, people. So this is a sessionable style, I will say, but when you get up to 7.5 and above 8% alcohol, you're really starting to get to bigger beer level, but this is 5.5 to 7.5. So a lot of fives in there, easy to remember. And final gravity is 1008 to 1016. So to me, anything below 1010 in final gravity is drier, above is getting sweeter. So it could be dry, 1008 to 1016, or it could be a little bit sweeter. That's a range. You'll just have to get used to it, but it can display in dry fashion for the finish, and I like that. International bitterness units, 40 to 70, right? 50, if you've heard me talk, is like the middle ground of getting much more discernible on bitterness and more aggressive. So less than 50 is less aggressive. So 40 to 70, how aggressive are these examples? It's a range. 40 to 70 IBUs is very different And also, too, that final gravity will help balance that residual sugar the more aggressive the bitterness gets. Standard reference method or color is going to be that brown, right? Reddish brown to dark brown, 18 to 35. I love that it ends at 35. If you know your SRM scale, 40 is the top. And so just remember, it doesn't get to black. Ends at 35, and 18 is definitely the beginning of brown, and that's an easier range to certainly remember. I skipped original gravity because unless you're brewing it, it's not as relevant. But 1056 to 1070, and that kind of takes you close to that ABV range of 5.5 to 7.5. And then so that's generally the vital statistics in the American BJCP version. Jeremy, do you want to add anything or not for our European friends and listeners?
Yes. So I will be the translator. So those of you who speak SRM, Julia gave you that. If you speak EBC or European Brewery Convention, you effectively double that. So we're looking at 36 to 70 as far as color goes. For the gravity, to translate that into original Plato, we're looking at 14 to 17 and a half. And final gravity, that kind of drops down to about 2 to 4. So when we start talking about the overall strength, and if you don't want to talk ABV, you want to talk just Plato in terms of strength, we're looking about 12 to 13 and a half. So all within a range of normal expected IPA stats. But let's talk about the glassware and the temperature. This is fun because I've had... I think every time I've had a brown IPA, it almost invariably ended up in a shaker pint. That was the beer that we loved in the 2000s and 2000 teens, and that's really when these IPA variants really started coming online. So most of them were served in shaker pints. There are worse glasses. There are worse things to drink beer out of, but there are also better ones. So I would prefer to see something like this in a Willie Becker. I would take it in a pub mug if you served it to me. But my favorite glass would be stemmed tulip. That way I can control my experience. And I am a professional. I know what I'm doing. Give me a good glass. When it comes to temperature, my general rule of thumb is the darker the stronger, the warmer I want it, and the lighter and weaker in ABV, the colder I want it. And so the range that I really want to stick in is between 40 to 50 Fahrenheit or 4 to 10 Celsius. I want this kind of in the middle. I'm just going to say right about the middle, because the flavors are going to start expressing themselves better and more. You get a better intensity and a quantity of aroma and therefore flavor when you let them open up a little bit. And so I want to hold this glass in my hand right after you pour it, or right after you pull it from the fridge, until I hit that sweet spot right about mid 40 Fahrenheit. Pairing suggestions. What would you pair with this, Julia?
I love the idea of pairing a style that's not as commonly known or experimented with. But anytime you have a brown ale, the pale ales, kind of darker ales, they all go well with grilled, roasted, and smoked foods, proteins, right? So obviously you elicit barbecue. You don't want something too rich and dense, but I think the hops will do really well for this style with barbecue. Think about putting fresh herbs on top of your barbecue after it kind of comes right off the grill. So that's what the American hops in this brown IPA, are going to do. And so I would put it with some barbecued ribs, easy peasy, no problem. I love the idea of corn fritters. Back to corn, I have that on my mind today. And for some reason, I have seafood on my mind today. So seared scallops could be a really good one. And that seared scallops over grits, I got both on my mind. Could go really, really well with this, because those brown Maillard reaction when you sear your scallop, which should not be fishy. Again, I'm anti-fishy fish. It should be seared, and so that's going to create some advanced malt flavors that that are advanced flavors that are looking for the malt to bridge into. So I think the brown IPA is going to serve very well with seared scallops over grits.
I'm gonna take your fish idea and I'm gonna riff with it. I think this would be amazing with some like halibut cheeks crusted with some Parmesan or a grilled swordfish that has been encrusted with cocoa and coffee grounds, and just to kind of get those bridges to unite with that brown IPA. But when I think about this beer, one of my favorites I think about that movie Chef with Jon Favreau. If anyone's listening or watching and you know Jon Favreau, you tell him thank you for me. In that movie, he made the ultimate grilled cheese, and I've made it at home. And it was basically on sourdough bread. You have aged cheddar, you have white cheddar, and I think it was Gruyere and Parmesan, and just made the most incredible grilled cheese sandwich ever. This beer is a absolute home run, slam dunk, touchdown, everything in one with that sandwich. That's what I want to have.
Absolutely. And on the vegetarian train, I'm going to add polenta cakes with pesto sauce on top and have that pesto marry with the American hops, especially if they're going towards the forest, and also an ode to our vegetarian friends.
Absolutely. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for listening. This is a tough style to find, but if you find it, grab two.
Cheers to each of you. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next show of Sense of Beer Style.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
and me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.